Good morning, everyone. We're 2 minutes past the appointed hour, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals and media may also be audibly and/or visually recording the meeting. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during the committee meetings. You don't want to annoy me. Approval of the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, through you, Madam Deputy Chair. Discussion item 10.7 has a presentation that's been added. Therefore, this matter has been moved to item 9.2. 10.8 is the Hamilton Future Fund Board of Governors Report 19001 from May 28, 2019, as well two added notices of motion, 12.1, the New Hope Community Bikes and Rogers Hometown Hockey Tour event, and item 14.1, Development Charges Deferral Agreement 122E with 1778235 Ontario Inc. It's a status litigation update, and that's pursuant to subsections F and K of the city's procedural bylaw and the Municipal Act.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Clark, second by Councillor Pearson. We need an e-vote on this one, folks. Thank you. It's been carried. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, may I please have approval of the minutes of the previous meeting on May 15th? Councillor Nan, Councillor Wilson, all those in favor, e-vote. On the minutes? Sure. Thank you. And Councillor Nan has an announcement. We can put that in now before consent of delegation requests.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just an announcement that I need to leave at 10:30 to attend the funeral for Ward 3 Public School Board Trustee Chris Parkinson, who unexpectedly passed away on Friday, who was a generous and active resident leader in the ward and throughout the city, was a co-founder of Eric's Cupboard that has provided essential needs and services to families in times of need. So unfortunately, I'll need to leave then, and we'll return afterwards.
Thank you, and please send our condolences. Thank you. So we can make that one. Delegation requests. 6.1, Erica May, HCA Dance Theatre, to inform the committee for the HCA Dance Theatre and the future of dance in Hamilton. This is for the June 19th GIC. And can we do these together? Okay, together. 6.2, Andrew Douglas and Becky Katz, the Center for Artistic and Social Practice, to share information regarding the impact of the center on Hamilton and the fundraising campaign for the Community Arts Project, also for the June 19th meeting. Councillor Partridge, Councillor Marula, and it's an e-vote, please. Thank you. Consent. Members of the committee, you have before you 7.1 to 7.4. We need to move a motion from 7.1 to 7.3 to receive. Is there any comments? Can we do them all in a block? Councillor Pearson, Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. On item 7.3, I just have one question. This is with regards to the Small Business Enterprise Center, and it's the 2018 activity report. Under the information section, the second paragraph, it stipulates that all programs and incentives have been leveraged through provincial funding, resulting in zero levy impact while supporting the local needs for economic development. And I'm just wondering if that provincial funding is secure going forward, or do we have any idea?
Oh, someone's coming down.
Through the chair, I'm going to ask the manager of the SBEC to address that question with you.
Absolutely.
And
Welcome,
just
Kirsten.
for the public record, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Kristen Hugenmoss, Coordinator, Small Business Enterprise Center.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Council, absolutely. We've just received agreements from our provincial partners, and 100% of our funding is secure for the next 3 years.
Excellent, and excellent work, by the way, on the Small Business Enterprise Center. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you.
So consent items 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, moved by Councillor Partridge, second by Councillor Danko. All those in favor, e-vote. Oh, no, it's received, sorry. Now we have 7.4, and this is the Lock Street Business Improvement Area Board of Management. We need an approval on this, an e-vote, moved by Councillor Marula, Councillor Wilson. All those in favor. So now we have 9.1, Commonwealth Games 2030. This is PED 19108. I'd like to call upon Carrie Brooks Joyner to provide the presentation for 9.1. Good morning, Carrie.
Full screen. There we go. Wonderful. Good morning. And thank you for the opportunity to highlight information around the Commonwealth Games bidding process as we know it at this time. There are multiple stakeholders that are going to be involved in the bidding process. And at this early point in the process, the major stakeholders are Hamilton 100, which has assumed the lead on the development of the bid, and its membership includes multiple community representatives. The second major stakeholder is the City of Hamilton, whose support and input is critical to a successful bid. And thirdly, Commonwealth Games Canada, who is leading the domestic bid process. For others, and they're listed on the screen, and there may be others that will be added to that list, their involvement will ebb and flow as the process unfolds over the next few months. Oh, Stephanie, I'm technically challenged here. Oh, good. There's the list of stakeholders. So the bidding process itself has two distinct phases. The domestic process, during which Canadian cities will express interest and develop their hosting proposals. This process results in one endorsed Canadian preferred bid city that is put forward into the international process by Commonwealth Games Canada. This two-step process is currently underway and will be completed in early 2020, and timelines within the domestic process are very short. The international process is led by Commonwealth Games Federation, the international body, and it will result in a final host city announcement. Requirements and deadlines for the international process have not yet been announced. It is anticipated that the international process will begin sometime in 2020, and the target date to announce The successful host city of the 2030 Games will be sometime between 2021 and 2023. In terms of the bidding process, we are currently within step 1 of the two-step domestic process. And Commonwealth Games Canada calls this the engagement phase. The deliverable for this phase is a hosting proposal part 1. And it is being prepared by Hamilton 100, which is the community consortium that has stepped forward to lead that process. This hosting proposal part 1 document is required by Commonwealth Games Canada to address the vision and concept for the Games, the legacy and impact of the Games, the sports program and proposed dates, an overview of the venue's master plan, an overview of the finances, and a local stakeholder interest and early commitment to partner. This document is due to Commonwealth Games Canada by November 22nd of this year. And it will come to GIC in early November with some staff recommendations. At this point, there's a lot we don't know yet, and the details will become clearer over the next few weeks and the summer months as Hamilton 100 completes the Part 1 hosting proposal. And just to be clear, at this point, Council has not yet committed to any financial investment towards the 2030 Games, nor has there been a decision by Council to endorse a formal bid. There are multiple points at which staff will report back to GIC with more information as it becomes available and seek incremental direction and approvals to continue within the process. These decision points are shown with a red outline on the screen, or if your hard copy in front of you is black and white with the rounded shapes in the flowchart. We are currently in the first red rectangle at the top right of the flowchart. And the report before you today from staff is seeking your direction to enter into an MOU with Hamilton 100 and to provide the necessary staff input into the development of the hosting proposal which Hamilton 100 is developing. We're also seeking direction for staff to review and analyze Hamilton 100's hosting proposal and report back to GIC at the November 6th meeting with recommendations about continuing with the process. Feasibility is the second phase of the domestic process, and the key deliverable is the hosting proposal part 2. The detailed requirements for this document are not yet available from Commonwealth Games Canada, but we have a pretty good idea from previous years what it will entail. The deadline is anticipated to be sometime in spring of 2020 for this documentation. This process will result in the shortlisting of a potential Canadian host cities, maybe more than one, and concludes with the selection of a single preferred Canadian bid city by Commonwealth Games Canada. Now, the process on these flowcharts is shown as linear, but in reality, some steps and tasks will occur concurrently between the major milestones. Council will have multiple points to review Hamilton's process through the process and provide direction to continue or withdraw from consideration. For example, if Commonwealth Games Canada shortlists Hamilton after review of the hosting proposal 1, staff will be reporting back to GIC with additional information about the Part 2 process and the resource implications for the City of Hamilton as they are known at that point. Assuming that Hamilton 100 completes a hosting proposal Part 2, staff will review it and bring recommendations back to GIC. And it's at this point the financial requirement and commitment of the city will be required. Once Commonwealth Games Canada selects the preferred bid city, and if it is Hamilton, Council will be asked to decide whether to approve entering into a multi-party agreement with the federal and provincial governments and commit to Hamilton's bid moving forward into the international bid process. So as a quick summary, Hamilton 100 is reporting that their work is well underway. Staff met with representatives last week. But there's lots of work to do, very short timelines, but there will be multiple check-in points with Council to approve continuing with this process. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. You may be up there a while, so you might want to grab the stool, or if you feel more comfortable, sit down up there. So we have a long list here.
Actually, I will go to the table where I have my notes in front of me.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this. So when we first were told about the Commonwealth Games, I thought that we were told that 50% of the cost would be coming from Canada, and yet in the report, it's a strange comment that says contribution limits. The government will limit its contribution to a maximum of 35% of total event costs and will not exceed 50%. So can I just get clarity? Is it 50% from the feds and then the rest is the province and the municipality?
Carrie?
Through the chair, the 30% is the published amount on the government's website as part of their sporting proposal. Communications that Hamilton 100 has had with the federal government has indicated a willingness to consider up to 50%.
Up to 50%. The costs of the last game, I'm looking at the notes here, and it looks like it's just shy of $2 billion. Is that correct? Am I reading it right? It shows here total 1,862 million. I think that translates to 1.8 billion.
Through the chair, that's correct. The budget was $2 billion, and the games came in under budget, and the actual costs were $1.86 billion.
Councillor?
Thank you. And if it's 50% from the feds and the rest is coming from the province and the municipality, I'm seeing on page 4, the financial commitment for the host municipality is 150 to 300 million for capital and operating can be anticipated. So could it be higher and closer to the 500 million mark?
Through the chair, that range has been provided to us from Commonwealth Games Canada from their experience and best guess, but certainly depending on the scope of the games, it could vary from that.
And do we know anything yet from the province in terms of the level of support that they're willing to invest in this type of bid?
Through the chair, staff have not engaged in a conversation with the province whatsoever, but it's my understanding that representatives from Hamilton 100 have had some preliminary conversations with the province.
Thank you. So do you want comments now too, Madam Chair, or just questions?
If it's all right with everyone, I'd like to just do questions quickly, and then we'll go right over to comments at the end.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. And we got Councillor Marula, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just with respect to the issue that I'm concerned about, where it reads requirements for non-sport venues, it does mention the Athletes Village, but there was talk at the original presentation that it would be accommodated at McMaster University, which I'm not supportive of, and I believe most of council agreed with me at that time, in that the legacy piece to this would be having permanent transitional affordable housing. So at the appropriate time, I would like to amend Appendix C accordingly, and I just through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, if Mike, if you could just elaborate on that particular issue with respect to what was discussed at the original meeting, where we stand presently, and the fact that we need to tighten up the language so that we move forward accordingly.
Okay, thank you. So you're going to work on that amendment, and I'll come back to
I
you.
have the amendment, but I'd just like to have Mike
Thank you.
speak to
So
it.
Mike?
Through the chair, we understand that in other jurisdictions related to other games is the Athletes Village in some cases has been transitioned to affordable housing. And if that is one of the objectives of council, is to realize a benefit of housing as it relates to the transition of the Athletes Village, I'll leave it in the hands of committee as to whether or not you wish to amend the report and ask staff to report back with respect to achieving that potential benefit through future updates as it relates to the proposal.
Okay, so thank you. And Madam Deputy Mayor, I think it's important to recognize and look at this from a frame of reference. The Pan Am Games, as everyone can recall, the success of that and the legacy piece to that was really valuable to Toronto and not necessarily to Hamilton per se. When you look at most of these expenditures and the capital upgrades, they tie into more of a operating subsidy in the future to sustain them. What Toronto ended up getting was over $2 billion worth of housing stock, which they're still using to this day. I'm in based on that, but I'm out if it's not included. So I'll present the amendment accordingly. The staff report back, and it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Nan, the staff report back through future updates on the potential to leverage the benefit of affordable housing through the transition of the Athletes Village to affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. So for process-wise, we're going to do questions. I'll come
Absolutely.
back to you, then Councillor Clark has
Thank you.
also mentioned he wanted to do comments. We'll do the amendment at that time. So thank you, and next up is Councillor Pauls.
Thank you. Through the chair. First of all, I want to put a plug that Hamilton Moves and Participation is doing a 2-week, they're doing a 2 weeks where every city participates in activities. They download the app, and then they're counted, and then the city has opportunity to win $150,000. So I hope the city, I know, is involved in that. So I just want to make a motion, not a motion, I want to just state
Announcement.
that everybody should really look into it and download the app, okay? So let's go back to Commonwealth Game, which is my passion here. Okay, I just want to ask Carrie, thank you for the presentation. I read it throughout. And my question first is, has the Commonwealth Games Federation demonstrated any interest in Hamilton as a possible host city?
Through the chair, yes, they have. Representatives from Commonwealth Games Federation will be doing a site visit in Hamilton, and will be meeting with Hamilton 100 at the end of July.
Thank you. Also, I want to, my councilor Sam Morella was talking about the athletes. We're going to have over 6,000 athletes here. And I know that PJ and the committee are making sure that the main athlete village will be affordable housing project. They are working on that. So I just wanted to make clear that that is their priority as well. So anyways, a couple of questions. First of all, on page 6 and 7, if we could go to 6 and 7. Okay. Okay, on the chart here, it said that the Gold Coast 2018 games and Glasgow 2014 games went under budget, if you could see that. And the city, only just over $100 million they spent in both. But the economic boost was $2.5 billion to the region. That is a huge return on their investment, including new facilities and legacy projects that will last for generations. Is that so?
Through the chair, yes. The chart represents information that was provided to us from a report that was prepared by Gold Coast itself.
Right. So the 150 to 300 million dollars could be a lot less.
Through the chair, potentially depending on the funding mix of partners, it could be less.
Okay. I'm just interested to see that the investment, including new facilities, I know that Hamilton, they have a lot of projects that are needed in the facility. We have arena to build in Hamilton. We have aquatic center. We have sports center complex that we do want to build. Is that right?
Through the chair, yes. There are facilities that are already identified in the capital plan.
So if the city were to spend maybe 100 million, do you think that's a good investment on all those facilities?
Through the chair, I will leave that for council to decide.
Okay, I
Good
think it's a
answer.
good investment.
Way to
Anyways,
go,
for all
Carrie.
those,
Next question.
okay, the next question is, okay, I also understand that the city portion may include value in kind, like land, private sector support to help out the municipality contribution, and this is all part of the tri-party negotiation. Is that right?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, so we have private sector, we have the city that could give land, and we have the federal and probably the provincial. So there is a lot of party interest in this, and I think it states that if we have all these party interests, that we are well on our way. So actually contribution could be less when you consider other financial support and value in kind other than cash amounts specified in the staff report.
Councillor Pauls, do you have questions? We're
Yes,
doing
I have another
questions.
question. Sorry, this is, I'm
No, you're
passionate
excited.
about that.
Absolutely.
I'm excited because I know this is the right thing to do. And the reason is this.
Okay,
we want
you're going into
affordable
comments
housing.
again. We want to do questions,
Okay.
please.
Okay. Also, I want to look at, I was looking at the 2010 bid, and on page, where was it? There's a page 4. Go on page 4. It says, although the Hamilton 100 Coalition will lead the bid development, there is some bid content that can only be provided by city staff. And a memorandum of understanding with the Hamilton 100 is recommended so that the resources required from the city of Hamilton can be identified. So I was looking at the 2010, and we had, I guess, Mayor Wade on the
Sorry,
committee.
2010 what? What are you referring to?
2010 bid.
Oh, the 2010 bid for the Commonwealth Games? Thank
For
you.
the Commonwealth Games. So we had Robert E. Wade, Robert Robertson, and Bill Fenwick. So in light of that, due to the importance of the size and scope of this project, possibly being the largest project in the city history, I would ask that the city manager designate a lead staff person, preferable a GM level, to work with the Hamilton 100.
Okay, that's an amendment, so we'll go to that
that
at
it?
the end. So we just need questions
Okay.
right now.
So basically, my main question is regarding Sam Morellas, we are going to do Main Athlete Village affordable housing, and I think that's an important issue.
Questions?
Thank you. That's my question.
Okay, so let's stick with questions,
And you know
folks.
what? I want to say, I get so excited about this, okay?
Yes,
So
it's
that's-
comment again. Thank you.
So I have the floor, thank
Yes.
you.
Councillor Partridge has the floor.
And you will get questions only for me. That's the rules so far as I understand it. So, Carrie, I'm just trying to find my page now. On page 6 of 9, could you just clarify for me, please, under financial overview, The very first line, it says, the two most recent Commonwealth Games have committed budgets of $2,029 million. Is that supposed to be 202.9 million? Page 6 of 9 in your report.
Under financial review?
Under financial review, very first line.
Yeah, it's just kind of funny, isn't it? Carrie, 2,029 million?
Through the chair, it would not, I am confident it's not $2.9 million. I can certainly go
I didn't
back.
question 2.9, I questioned 2,029 million. When it comes to financial information, folks, we need to be accurate, so I'm not looking to make anybody, look bad. I just need clarity. What is that amount supposed to be? Perhaps Mike Zagarek could answer that.
So through the chair, it is 2 billion. It's 2.029 billion was the budget, the actual.
Billion or million?
Billion.
Billion with a B.
Billion with a B.
So it's not million, as it states in the report, and it's
2.029 billion
billion, okay.
was a budget, and actuals were 1.862 billion.
And this is on page 6 of 9. I just want to make sure for clarity, okay? This is really important stuff. So it's 2.029 billion, not million.
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you. So now, if we can get to some other questions. Carrie, the list of Hamilton 100 partners, I don't actually see the list in the report. You did have it up on the screen. It kind of went by very, very quickly. If you could go back to it, that would be terrific.
There we go.
That's the
Through the chair,
stakeholders,
the
that's not the list of 100.
Through the chair, I don't have a current list of the members of Hamilton 100. They are still adding members, and as they are developing the proposal and establishing new community connections and realizing what strengths they need on their committee. So I can certainly ask them for a current list and distribute that.
All right, no, I appreciate that. If they're still building, and it's my understanding through you, Chair, that they'll all be contributing financially to the bid?
Through the chair, Hamilton 100 collectively is covering the cost of the bid preparation, yes.
Of the preparation. Okay, thank you. And that list that's in front of us here includes neighboring municipalities. Can you just expand a little more on that? And I'm asking the question in the context of what we went through with the Pan Am Games.
Through the chair, with an event this size, we regularly count on our neighboring municipalities for assets that we would utilize towards a successful implementation. For example, we would be partnering with the neighborhood municipalities for hotel rooms. And there may be sporting venues for practice fields, that sort of thing that we would look to Burlington, St. Catharines perhaps for. It will depend on the final venue plan and the hosting proposal.
Councillor?
So, thank you, Madam Deputy. So there is there a chance, as what happened with the Pan Am Games, that dollars could go to other municipalities to build the venues there and not build them in Hamilton?
Through the chair, that would be the choice of this community and the venue plan that Hamilton put forward.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. So not the decision of this council, but it would be the decision of the Commonwealth Games?
At this point, through the chair, the decision-making about the final fine-tuning of the venue plan is unclear, but the City of Hamilton would certainly have a voice in that discussion. We would have to make sure that the venue plan met the needs of the Commonwealth Games and the requirements of the Commonwealth Games Federation. So it would be a multi-partner discussion to finalize that venue plan.
All right, thank you, Carrie. I appreciate the honesty of that answer, as all your answers are. And Madam Chair, my last question on page 8 of 9. below the bullets, it says the province of Ontario does not have stated guidelines around funding multi-sport games where the funding request is over $1 million. Through you, Madam Chair. Carrie, we're obviously anticipating that the requested amount will be more than $1 million?
Through the chair, at this early point, we don't have a figure, but we can anticipate that it would be more than that, yes.
Okay. And my last question, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
I just want to unpack the deadlines again, because as I understood, and I'm going to feed this to you, and then if you could just feed back what's accurate, what isn't. I understand that lots of work is being done, and the final report will come to council on November the 6th, 2019. Is that correct?
Through the chair, not a final report. It will be a draft hosting proposal part 1
Right.
that is prepared by Hamilton 100. It will be accompanied by a staff report which will comment on that proposal prepared by the community.
Thank you. And my final part of that question, the deadline, as I understand it, for submission of the Phase 1, as you've referred to it, is just about 2 weeks later on November 22nd, 2019. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And
Last chance.
first of all, I want to thank Carrie for putting this together. I know her hands are full right now with the Canadian Open in full swing. And I see Sharon's here also, so there's a lot of activity going on in our community right today to be able to hit this deadline to have this report before us. So I just want to confirm again that you're looking for the expectation will be the municipality puts in 150 to 300 million. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Carrie?
Through the chair, that is the range that Commonwealth Games Canada has shared with us as an expectation.
Councillor?
Okay, and to go to this next step, which you're looking for today, which is a green light to go ahead with the business plan, the cost to the municipality is $50,000?
Through the chair, no, we are not seeking any dollars from council at this early point. We are simply seeking direction to enter into an MOU with Hamilton 100 and to continue working with them and to report back to GIC.
As I saw in the report, $50,000 in staff time.
Through the chair, that was in an earlier draft and that has been removed.
Oh, I'm glad I asked that question then.
Through the chair, we estimate that the staff time that we are investing will be worth about $50,000,
That's what I was looking
but we are not seeking dollars from council to offset that, nor are we seeking those dollars from Hamilton 100.
Okay, because as I think we all know, we're getting tapped on the shoulder to host a lot of things these days, and everyone comes with a price tag. How many other Canadian cities are you expected to be up against to become the Canadian nominee?
Carrie?
Through the chair, we do not have that information, but we understand that there is at least 2 who are considering it.
Is Toronto one?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
That does not mean that behind closed doors they are proceeding.
Councillor?
Often that information is confidential and we simply don't have it.
And we won't know that until we submit the bid. And the cost of going the next step to putting the bid through to for the Canadian nominee is how much for the municipality?
Through the chair, 0. Hamilton 100 is covering the costs of the bidding
Preparation
process.
of it, but there's no bid fee or that we typically bump into with these, whether it's a Grey Cup game or a Canadian Open or other things. There's no bid fee to get in the game?
Through the chair, no, there is not.
Okay, thank you. And of course, I still have some very serious wounds from the Pan Am. We had the Ticats demanding that they needed a new stadium, and then we're halfway through it. They pounded the table and said they'll never play in West Harbor. So I want to be very cautious about these things as we proceed forward, because that decision will haunt me. And so through this business plan process, we'll be able to lock down exactly what we're looking for capital, where it would go and what it is.
Through the chair, yes, Rome Delangelo and Chris Hurstek and myself are all working on this file and with Hamilton 100.
Councillor?
Okay, and so you have time to do this. Like Rome's a busy guy, you're a busy woman, and You have time to do this, do you?
Through the chair, we are making the time.
Good answer again.
Yeah, it's a good answer, I guess. I would say a vague answer, but it's a good answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much. What are our objectives in hosting these games?
Carrie?
Through the chair, in terms of hosting any major event, the city looks to the economic impact of the game, of any event. We are looking for positioning of Hamilton in a positive light, provincially, nationally, internationally. And we also look to social benefits for an event back to the city. Specific objectives have not yet been articulated for this bid or for this event, but that certainly could be part of the final bid that goes forward, should council wish it.
Councillor?
Thank you. I know these are early days, but I find the absence of any articulated objectives concerning, because I think it is the responsibility, particularly given the scope of public money that will be required, that we be clear in, similar to Councillor Marula's upcoming motion, that we be clear in what our expectations are and what we're hoping to achieve in hosting, because I think that will also play a role in if there are facilities to be built, where those facilities are to be built. And I would, there is,
a question?
yeah, that is my question. When will those objectives be set out for council? And my other question is, I've been here for 6 months, and I've received a number of reports which speak to the economic uplift of partnering with private organizations or otherwise for sporting events. And there's always reference to economic spin-off. And there is a growing amount of literature and research which cast doubt on those spin-offs. And I was wondering if part of this exercise, will we be clearly articulating the cost, short and long-term, operational and capital, if we are to host these games? Could you answer that for me?
Two questions. One is, when will we get the objectives sorted out? And the second question was about the cost in that swing.
Through the chair, in terms of the objectives, I would anticipate that the hosting proposal 1 prepared by Hamilton 100 will articulate the objectives as they in the community see it. Staff can certainly bring forward objectives as part of the report on November the 6th, and council can judge the alignment between the two. And I've forgotten the second question.
Will part of this exercise give us an analysis of the spin-offs? What are the short and also the costs?
Through the chair, at this early point in the process, we do not have that information. I would anticipate, as part of the development of the budget and the finances, that we would be looking to include those costs. And I'll look to Mike Zagaric for any additions to that.
Mike?
Through the chair, once the proposal defines the sporting events and the associated facilities, we'll be in a better position to identify what the capital requirements and the associated operating requirements are. At that time, we'll be able to examine potential financing strategies, and we'll be in a better position to report back to council as it relates to the investments and the associated financing strategy. To the question with respect to a economic benefit assessment, staff could undertake a general assessment in terms of what the economic benefit is, but I would suggest, if committee and council wish to have a more comprehensive review, that may be a direction that staff could investigate and report back on how to facilitate a more comprehensive economic benefit assessment.
I would appreciate that. It just takes a cursory look at some of the academic research and who do a deep dive on some of these sporting activities to raise a few questions about the alleged economic spin-off. So if that could be forthcoming, I would appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Danko, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and my apologies to Councillor Clark if this is where you're going to go. On the financials, when I was reading this, I assumed that there was a decimal place missing here. In the 2,029 million, I was in my head assuming that was 202.9 million. Now
Actually, we got it corrected. It's 2 billion.
Yes. So it's an entire order of magnitude higher than I, in my head, was expecting. And the financial commitment to the city of 150 to 300 million, when I was reading this, I was thinking that 50% of that would be the federal government and provincial partners as well. So on the financials, we're expecting a $2 billion total investment, and we're hoping that the the federal government will cover 50% of that, so that's $1 billion, which would leave another 700 to 850 million to be covered by, I'm assuming, the province or other corporate sponsors, and the remainder 150 to 300 million covered by the municipality. Is that the assumed breakdown?
Through the chair, that is a estimate based on the experience of the Gold Coast. It was considered a highly successful games financially, so we're certainly looking to it as a model to start the conversation and planning around the games. But at this point, we do not have a budget for the games developed.
But based on that assumption of a $2 billion, that's the breakdown. So, I mean, there's a few pretty big assumptions in there currently, correct?
Through the chair, at this early part in the planning process, yes, there are assumptions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to, Councillor Vanderbeek's not here, so we're going to go to Councillor Jackson, please.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. Sorry for being a few minutes late, Carrie. Just a couple of questions, Carrie. So we've been burned in the past, of course, with New Delhi. We got burned in the past with Halifax, and then they dropped out, and we would have been an excellent Commonwealth Games bid. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, through you to Carrie, I think in a question you answered to Councillor Ferguson, you piqued my curiosity that, to your knowledge, there's one or two potentially other bids that word on the street is may want to enter the 2030 games. You just want to confirm that, Carrie, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, please?
Through the chair, as much as I can confirm that it's rumor, yes, there are other host cities considering the games, as we would expect for a event of this magnitude, that cities will consider it and make a decision whether to proceed or not.
Councillor?
So I'm not putting anyone on the spot, but I've been led to believe the last year or two, even to present time, Madam Deputy Mayor, through you to Carrie, that Councillor Jackson, the 100th anniversary makes all the sense in the world, and through the grapevine, Commonwealth Games organizers, the international, they want it to be in Hamilton. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, through you to Carrie. Carrie, how soon will we find out? Will we find out by your November 6th report back in conjunction with the Private 100 group? Will there be more clarity on whether the games internationally truly want Hamilton to have this, or are we going to be up against competing national bids? Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you. Carrie?
Through the chair, I certainly can't speak for either Commonwealth Games Canada or Commonwealth Games Federation and their decision-making process. That being said, Hamilton does have a very strong legacy case to make to bring the games to Hamilton. The 100th anniversary story is very compelling, and both bodies are well aware of Hamilton's connection to 2030 as do other municipalities in Canada.
Thanks, Carrie. And lastly, Madam Deputy Mayor, so Carrie, you're running today, if we support this, you're running concurrently with the Games 100 group led by PJ Mercanti, came in a couple of months ago, and we basically sanctioned them, I believe, unanimously, and good luck, and go to it. So you're running concurrently with them. If we approve your recommendation today, let me get that question out first, then I'll have a subsequent question through you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I'm not clear what you mean running concurrently. Staff are prepared to provide information that Hamilton 100 requires to complete this first proposal.
So is that why this recommendation, that's the clarity I'm trying to get, Carrie, why this recommendation is here before us? Because after the excellent private sector presentation in late March, I was waiting for them to come back to GIC with hopefully great news of what they have been able to secure. Now today, it's staff saying, give us as well the ability. So can you just reconcile that for me? It's obviously a joint thing, or it's not a joint thing. They're still the lead, and you're just here to provide extra resource. If we didn't approve this today, you would not have the ability to provide that resource. Just clarify that for me, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Through the chair, Hamilton 100 is the lead on developing the hosting proposal, Part 1. They are seeking city staff assistance with information that they require. The report before you asks permission to formalize the relationship between the city and Hamilton 100 in terms of the bid preparation, just for clarity.
So this officially formalizes it as what you're looking for before you and staff proceed any further. And lastly, Madam Deputy Mayor Carey, November 6th, I've always wanted to make sure whatever the project I want to give a chance for to move along the journey, but I always want to make sure, as I call it, my exit ramp if I need to. Is November 6th without punitive, without penalty? Is November 6th the opportunity where we can still, if we wish to, and we may hear there's suddenly 4 other cities in Canada, in spite of all the sentimentality that Hamilton should get this, is November 6th still an opportunity for council to say, without penalty, that we don't want to pursue this any further? Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Carrie?
Through the chair, November 6th is one of many opportunities for council to have an off-ramp, as you put it. Today is also an off-ramp opportunity, should council wish that, but the next one coming up would be November 6th.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you. I was looking at Brad Clark, thinking that he was next.
Sorry?
Brad's name was ahead of me. So
He's second time.
I'm assuming he's
Second time. And we're doing questions only. Go ahead.
Thank you. Carrie, thank you for your presentation. And I did hear PJ Mercanti on Bill Kelly this morning, and it sounds very exciting. Most of my questions have already been asked, except for a couple. So I'm going to start with this one. The memorandum of understanding that you are asking us to give you the go-ahead to work on, is that what you're bringing back on November 6th, or are you bringing back a memorandum of understanding before that, so that we have an opportunity to know what that understanding is?
Through the chair, the recommendation gives the authority to Jason Thorne to execute that memorandum of understanding, so it would not be coming back to GIC. On November 6th, what will be coming back is Hamilton 100's draft proposal as in the form available at that time, and a staff report analyzing and making recommendations about the feasibility of that hosting proposal and making recommendations to council on proceeding.
Thank you. And my second question is probably to GM Mike Zagarek. I would like to know, before we get too deep into this, if we were to support this move of moving forward, to be looking at the possibility of approving something further on the 6th of November, I would like to know where we are going to find $150 to $300 million. and how we're going to repay that without a major impact on our taxpayer.
So through the chair, as I mentioned previously, is I would assume that when the proposal comes before committee, it will better define what sporting events would be considered within that proposal and the facilities required to host those events, as well as all the ancillary activity that would be required to support a successful Commonwealth game. At that time, staff would be in a better position to identify what the capital requirements and the operating requirements are, as well as Carrie's identified that there are stakeholders will need a better understanding as to the potential roles and responsibilities of those stakeholders. So as an example, if the aquatics events were to be hosted at McMaster, given that McMaster is a separate entity that the city does not have any ownership of, would those assets be the responsibility of the federal, provincial, and McMaster University? So again, you'll have heard me state previously is the city cannot issue debt. We're limited in our financing for assets that do not belong to the city. So again, as we have a better appreciation as to which events would go forward through the proposal and the facilities required to support a successful games, we'll be in a better position to report back as to what the costing is, as well as some options with respect to a financing strategy.
Councillor?
Thank you. So I'd just like to feedback what I think I'm hearing here. So the minimum $150 to $300 million, some of that investment could be partners' investment, not necessarily city council investments.
Through the chair, the short answer is yes. So subject to the vision as it relates to the sporting events and the associated facilities, again, as Carrie's identified, some of those facilities may be supported outside of the city of Hamilton. That will be Hamilton 100 and this council's determination as to how the games would proceed as it relates to the proposal. But again, we'll need a more comprehensive appreciation as to the events and where those events would be hosted. And at that time, we'll be in a better position to look at the costing and the investment strategy.
Thank you. And so through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, that those figures, are they anticipated to be part of the November 6th report?
Through the chair, I would expect that there would be some preliminary figures as part of the hosting proposal part 1, yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. I believe Councillor Clark wants to do comments. Councillor Partridge, are you on comments or more questions? Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. And so the question I forgot to ask is, when is the final submission? So we have the November 6th, we have the November 22nd. When is the Phase 2 final submission? When will that be due?
Through the chair, we do not have a firm date announced by Commonwealth Games Canada. We anticipate it will be in early 2020.
So you feel, through you, Madam Chair, you feel fairly certain that it will be within this term of council?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, thank you. And Madam Chair, the bid would be for the 2030 games, is that correct?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. And so the question I have is, it's always been my understanding that we cannot bind a future council. And what we're talking about here is 2019, 2020, up to 2022, but the actual commitment, the dollars, whatever's going to shake out is going to be 2030. So I'm not sure whether Jeanette or Mike or Carrie, but who can answer my question about not binding a future council?
So through the chair, if, and Carrie may have a better appreciation as to the timing and the date. You'll see in the slide described as domestic process, one of the last actions in that flow chart is agreements. It would be through the execution of those agreements that the city council would be making a commitment with respect to proposals. So again, as it relates to binding, council binding future councils, council can bind future councils through the execution of agreements. And again, it would be subject to the timing of those agreements.
I appreciate that answer, but are we talking about, we're not talking about the memorandum of understanding, we're talking about a memorandum of agreement that would be the final stage, is that correct?
Through the chair, it would be a multi-partner funding agreement.
And will that one come back to council? Because I'm hearing the memorandum of
chair.
understanding is not coming to council.
Through the chair, that multi-party agreement would have to have council's signature and approval.
Okay. Because I'm not on for the memorandum of understanding not coming back here. We've been burned in the past.
Through the chair, if I can just clarify,
Sure.
the purpose of the memorandum of understanding is to outline the roles and responsibilities of Hamilton 100 and staff. It is not about the bid itself, it is about the working relationship.
But we're still not going to see that.
Through the chair, timing-wise, it would be challenging for it to come back. We can certainly provide it for information.
Right.
But for approval would be challenging, given the deadline that Hamilton 100 has for that proposal to be submitted at the end of November.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. And Councillor Paul's just checking in. Is this comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Councillor Nan's first time, so we'll go there, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question to Carrie. I apologize, as I was a little bit distracted when you're responding to Councillor Wilson's question about clarifying objectives. You said that that would be forthcoming. I'm curious if we can go a little bit deeper in setting the types of objectives and clarifying what legacy, specifically in terms of benefits to the community, as we're providing an assessment of the cost and benefit. I assume that would be under B of the recommendation, that when staff are reviewing and analyzing Hamilton 100's hosting proposal, that we're analyzing it based on what kind of community benefits we would see as a result of that, both in terms of legacy, in terms of for our residents, in terms of for our population, and then an assessment of cost and benefit. Is that fair to say that that would be inside the review and analysis of the proposal?
Through the chair, you are absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going now to comments. Councillor Clark. Oh, sorry. Oh, question. I apologize.
Thank you, through the chair. I want to ask this to Carrie. I was going to put a motion due to the important size and scope of this project, possibly being the largest project in our city's history. I would like to ask the city manager to designate a lead staff person, preferably at the GM level, to work with the Hamilton 100. So in scope of page 4, and I would read more, but in page 4, it sort of says that, where
So
you
your
will
question is
provide-
to add that
Yeah,
as
should
an
I add
amendment?
that as an
Then that would be an amendment. You can add that as an amendment when we do the comments, because Councillor
No,
Marla
I'm
does.
just wondering, should it be a motion? I'm just asking.
So Carrie, who's the lead person on this if this were to go through today?
Through the chair, at the moment, I am the lead to communicate with GIC. We are working as a staff team, so there's 3 directors. It is myself, Chris Hersteck, and Rome Delangelo, who are working collectively to move this file forward.
I would like to put an amendment, then, not amend, a motion, that we would include provision for the mayor or a designate from council also to sit on the Hamilton 100 executive, ensuring that the city has valuable input and feedback into the project. But I put that as a motion.
Through the chair, Hamilton 100 determines its own membership, and they are certainly welcome to invite other members, but I would suggest that council cannot simply place someone on their committee.
It's just that the 2010, when it had the mayor on and a few others, so I just asking if I could put a motion. If we could do that.
Through the chair, the bidding group for 2010 was very different. It was city-led, and this bid is being led by the community.
All right, thank you.
So we're on to comments now. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm still supportive of moving forward to actually get more information on this, so my comments shouldn't be deemed as trying to obstruct the process. I really would appreciate it if staff could get back to us on what that methodology was with regards to the economic uplift that they are using from the Gold Coast, I guess it is. When I'm looking...
Hang on a second. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
When I look at the different economic models for uplift, and I've had this be in my bonnet before, they seem to be incredibly subjective. So before we become cheerleaders that this is going to bring in, you know, $2, $3, $4 billion worth of economic uplift, it would be helpful if we all were on the same page in terms of what the methodology was that we were going to assess that economic uplift. I would like as soon as possible to understand where the province is going with their international games investment cap. I can't seem to find anything at tourism. I don't know whether or not they still have an international games protocol, but we need to know that number now, not later, so that we have a better understanding in terms of where we're going. The source of funding, I can't remember, I think it was Councillor Vanderbeek that asked the question. It would be helpful if after the MOU and when it's coming back, we actually have where we believe the source of the funding is going to be. We need to understand that going forward. We also need to know, Madam Chair, the future financial risks and unfunded liabilities that the city may have that we have not considered. You know, the large investment on LRT, we don't know the outcome there. So there's a lot of large unfunded liabilities that we may not be aware of. And if we're going to be considering 150 to, and I'm going to say $500 million, because if you're looking at a true provincial, federal, municipal agreement, it's 50% from the province, and then we split the other 50%. So if it's a $1.8 billion investment in games, then our portion could feasibly be very close to $500 million. We need to know that. And we need to know what the unfunded liabilities are that may impede that. And finally, the last comment I have, and I think it was Councillor Partridge that raised it, I completely agree. I cannot accept, and I will not vote for the main motion the way it's worded right now, where staff are going to develop and execute a memorandum of understanding. That's unacceptable. If you're going to develop the memorandum of understanding, bring it back to us. We're the ones that finalize it and say, yes, execute it. If we're not going to have any say in it, that's very questionable from a governance standpoint. So I understand the timing constraints, but it's not on. If staff are going to have that authority to write it and execute it without talking to council about it, I have a problem with that. So I'll make that very clear right now. And I support Councillor Marilla's motion. He's absolutely bang on. It should be a part of the memorandum of understanding so that we can clarify upfront that any of the athlete housing is going to become not-for-profit housing for us in the end. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will come back to you to amend that sentence. We'll just take out "and execute," I would suggest, and I'll come back to you for that amendment. Councillor Marilla, for your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. And it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Farr that staff, in conjunction with Hamilton 100, through the hosting proposal, incorporate the legacy of affordable housing through the transition of the Athlete Village to affordable housing. And just quickly, as I mentioned earlier, and I did misspeak or misspoke with respect to the amount that Toronto gained from the Pan Am. It was over $200 million of transitional housing to affordable housing that they obtained from Pan Am, which today would be worth quite a bit more as a result of the increase of value. And it's so tangible, and it's something that, for me, is really the objective and purpose of this entire process, not to mention the athleticism of it all and the entertainment value, but we all know what our affordable housing challenges are. And this truly speaks volumes with respect to partnering with upper levels of government in a very creative manner to get some affordable housing from them. And that's conducive to helping what is today a crisis in our community. So I appreciate your time and the motions before us, and I do agree with Councillor Clark as well as Councillor Partridge, not related to this motion, that the memorandum of understanding is something that should not be signed off on today, because that's what we're being asked to do, which I can't support, but that it come back to us at a future date to be signed off on accordingly.
Okay, so we're going to deal with your amendment right now, and it's an e-vote, folks. This is the amendment. You heard it loud. Anybody, any questions, any concerns? JP, you've got concerns? Okay. So can we do the e-vote, please? Okay, so that's that amendment. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go through the amendments first and then come back for comments. So Councillor Pauls, you have an amendment? So to request of the Hamilton 100 committee that a designate, and they're all shaking their head yes. So, and who's your seconder? Second. And can you, oh, sorry, can I put you on? Sorry about that. Go ahead.
The mayor?
Seconded by the mayor. Can you just read it again because I didn't have you on the microphone?
Request to consider including the mayor or a city councillor on the Hamilton 100 Executive Committee.
All right. So I believe any comments? Or we can just go to the e-vote, please. Oh, comment, Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess my question is, if we're just putting the request out there, but if indeed they do move it forward, we are then going to have Carrie, the two directors, potentially a GM, and potentially the mayor. And I'm wondering if that then opens the city up to being responsible or picking up some of the costs, if that somehow changes the dynamic.
So I'm going to ask Carrie. I don't believe the staff
Through
remembers.
the chair, just as a point of clarification, Rome, Chris, and I are not members of Hamilton 100. We liaise with them on behalf of the city.
And I understand that. Thank you for the clarification, but you're still providing services in your liaison responsibilities, right?
Through the chair,
Still
that is
providing
correct.
information. You're still meeting with them. And I guess the other concern I have is this 100-plus group is all private members. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I'm not sure what you mean by private members. They
Private
are
businesses?
a consortium of private sector representatives and community representatives as well.
That's what I meant, so thank you for clarifying that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so are we ready to vote? Ready to vote on this? Thank you. E-vote, please. Thank you. One last amendment that I know of. Councillor Clark, your amendment, please. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just doing amendments.
So the amendment is to move to delete the words "and execute" in Part A, and to add a Part C.
Well, this will be D now. C is your affordable housing.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I forgot about that. Thank you.
Sorry,
Hang on a
through
second,
you,
we
Madam Deputy Mayor. Councillor Marula was C, Councillor Pauls was D.
Oh, sorry. You're E.
Let's go through the alphabet.
Right.
Part E, which
double
will
E.
read "and report back to the General Issues Committee." It's moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Marula.
Okay. Do we have a date for that? Do we need a date?
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, I can just do that all as subsection A, just to amend subsection A to say, take out the words "and execute" and add report back to GIC at the end of the paragraph, if that works.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So can we have an e-vote on that one, please? Oh, sorry, questions for this amendment? Mayor?
Yeah, so
curious on the timeline issue, so I wasn't here for that part of the presentation. So is there a, I agree with the notion and their direction, so what's the timeline constraint that you're dealing with? If I could just understand that, please.
Through the chair, staff will be back to GIC at the November 6th meeting with Hamilton 100's draft hosting proposal 1 and a staff report analyzing it and making recommendations to council. Should the MOU come back to GIC, it would have to be sometime before then.
Okay, so there's no time constraint issue relative to that, bringing it back the next GIC meeting whenever you get it done. I heard a time constraint issue. Is there one?
Through the chair, it's simply to follow the timeline for getting information into clerks and to council through the usual schedule, but we can certainly fast track it.
Okay, so getting a memorandum of understanding to this table would take how much time?
I think Jeanette wants to jump in here, Carrie.
Yep.
City Manager?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So I think it's more, there's a whole process of getting reports drafted and through the clerk's process, but we can look at working with clerks to fast track that. The MOU really is about just clarifying what staff's role. Is it giving them data? Is it giving them information on our sporting facility, our recreation facilities, et cetera?
Right.
So we'll fast track that and get that forward. And if I could ask your indulgence, this has been really good discussion. I just want to clarify the information that you want to make sure is included when we come back in November. Because if it has to be submitted November 22nd, we won't have time to kind of go back and forth with additional information. So if you don't mind, Deputy Mayor, if I could go through what I heard, what we're looking for that's not necessarily captured in the motion. So when we come back in November with our analysis of the impact on the city of Hamilton 100's bid, you would like us to come back with what are those objectives of why the city should support and participate in this, from economic, social benefits, et cetera. And I'm hearing that housing is a very important one. Second, to be very clear around the economic benefits and spin-offs and truly what really is that. Is there some quantitative data from either our past events or the other host facilities to really quantify it? And economic benefits, I would think, to the city, but is it other levels of government that are maybe benefiting? And I also heard we need to come back and how we will fund our municipal share of this proposal, and how does that relate to the other committed projects that we have and unfunded liabilities, and how do we balance all that out? And so we will bring that with as much detail as we have based on the first proposal. And we want clarity on what the province's commitment is to this. And I think that was everything.
Thank you. And again, we'll come back. We have an amendment on the floor. I think that's what you're flagging me about. So thank you very much for that, City Manager. So sorry, go ahead.
To you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Actually, no, it's not about the amendment. It's just to provide clarification to Jeanette. She said that the process is clerk's process. It is definitely not. The calendar is council approved. So if clerks are aware of it and there's time between now and November to prepare the memorandum of understanding, if we're aware, we work with you on the deadline. We only push back when reports are always late. So it is council's, just because you are new here, so that you start from the beginning, fresh up.
Fair. Touche, fair enough.
All right, so getting back to my question.
Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
No, I'm always forgotten the question myself, actually, but I'll rethink this one. So to have it come back as a memorandum of understanding, given the circumstances, what kind of complexity are we talking about in terms of timing and getting it sooner rather than later? And I understand that there's a desire to have it sooner rather than later. So November is probably not the right time. So what I see Nicole squirming over there. So what are we squirming about? What's the issue?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to the Mayor, it's not an issue insofar as we will assign the staff resources to this if it becomes a priority. I think there may be some timing issues in terms of getting the right parties to the right place to be able to execute agreements and that sort of thing without then delaying staff being able to provide the information. So there's a critical path, right? So we don't want to delay that so that the ultimate November deadline is put in jeopardy by any way. So we'll make the staff resources available depending on council's direction here.
Okay, so far, I haven't heard anybody give me an approximate, which is what I'm looking for. Give me 1 month, 2 months, November?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, so I don't know, some of those factors are outside of city staff control in terms of the committee being in a position to be able to execute or deliver on some of those, like to be able to sign an MOU or to be able to enter into that agreement. From a staff point of view, we're happy to be able to move that forward. We can prepare that in weeks, depending on other staff input.
Okay, so we're not talking, 3 or 4 months from now, we're talking potentially a month, let's say. Is that reasonable? Yes, Jeanette?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to clarify, I think it's hard for us to commit because we need to get information from Hamilton 100 about what they need from us. So I'm looking at nods up, and if they can be very clear to us quickly, then I think we can move it forward. And I would estimate August, but it truly is an estimate based on the clarity we get from the Canada 100 folks on what they need from us.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to say a month. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say about a month.
Okay, you're good with that.
So I'll just stick with that, and I'll keep leaning on that for that. Thank you so very much for
happy
your
with that.
for your
Okay.
approximations. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. So Councillor Danko, this is on the amendment? No? Okay. Councillor Paul's on the amendment? Thank you. And Councillor Ferguson on the amendment. Is that what your questions are about? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to pick up on where I had the same question the mayor had. We can't get on with the business plan until this MOU gets executed. There's a lot of work to put the MOU together, and we only meet once in July, which is early July, and once in mid to late August. And if they can't even start the business plan until mid to late August, which is the date I think I heard Carrie say, does this put the November date at risk? I'm not sure what you're going to come back with that's so critical, because it's simply putting together an MOU of how to prepare a business plan, which our staff are all very good at, preparing business plans. So will you be able to make the July meeting, the early July meeting, with the draft MOU that we can approve? If not, I'm not convinced we need to do this. I think that this is just an MOU to give them authority to go ahead and prepare the business plan report back in November. So can you be back at the July meeting?
City Manager?
We can aim for it. I would hate to commit until I get further clarity on what they're looking for the city. But to be clear, it's not like we're not doing anything while we're working and clarifying the roles and responsibilities in MOU. There's things happening concurrently. So it will not put the November report back and potential submission in jeopardy.
So if we approve this amendment, we're not putting the November date at risk?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Councillor Clark on the amendment.
Just want to be clear that the mayor can call a special GIC meeting as soon as we get the document. This isn't a difficult situation. We're trying to get the MOU. We all have jobs here as councillors, so if he calls a special meeting, attend or don't attend. That's our job.
Okay, on the amendment, folks, because I understand the other two speakers are not on the amendment. So an e-vote, please, on the amendment. Thank you. Now we're going to comments on the report. Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. So through you to our staff, my question is, this is going to come back on November 6th with a submission November 22nd. What happens after November 22nd? We kind of touched on that, but I'm thinking more in terms of evaluation of what we submit, the business case, everything else. There's no time between November 6th and the submission, so what happens after November 22nd?
Carrie?
Through the chair, on November 22nd, the hosting proposal part 1 is submitted to Commonwealth Games Canada. Commonwealth Games Canada then kicks into their review process of all proposals that they have received. They then do, assuming that it is multiple proposals from Canadian cities, they go through a short listing process. They then invite the cities that make it through that process to come back with a hosting proposal part 2.
So once this is officially submitted, are we bound to follow through with it?
Through the chair, no, council still has a off-ramp between proposal 1 and 2, and actually another one after proposal 2, prior to signing any multi-party funding agreement.
Okay, so just a few comments on this whole, where we are right now, where we're going. So we're looking at a $2 billion investment in the city Hamilton, which has the potential to be absolutely amazing. We're looking at roughly 1/8 of the cost to be covered by the municipality. I think there's some obvious, serious questions about how that's going to happen. To date, there's no real clear purpose, there's no clear vision of why we're doing this besides Yay Games. And when I'm comparing this to other major investments, I mean, the obvious one is LRT, which is a $1 billion investment in our city, half of this amount, which took 10 years of investigations, studies, political wrangling, verification of business cases, which we still don't agree on the business outcomes or the potential economic uplift of LRT, which has been studied for years and years and years, with no investment by the city of Hamilton, the entire cost being covered by the province. So I guess my concern is that there seems to be a bit of a, well, not a bit, a huge dichotomy between how we've approached that project and all the blood, sweat, and tears that's gone into that, with a clearly articulated end goal and vision that has the potential for a massive social and cultural change to our city, versus this process where we're going to have MOU come back with the bid going in November 2nd, and then we're kind of all in and we're heading down this track for double the amount of investment. So I don't think that the obvious approach between the two is going to be noticed clearly. So I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic. If this is done correctly, and if the economics are really and truly investigated, there's no reason why this can't be another once-in-a-lifetime amazing benefit to the city. But obviously we have our duty to do our due diligence here and proceed cautiously. So happy to proceed with the bid as it is now, but I'm really not skeptical, but I think there's a lot of assumptions still out there that an analysis that needs to be done on this, and we need to be careful because obviously Pan Am didn't go the way we were expecting, and our residents and taxpayers expect us to be wise with how we're investing their money. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That's all I heard throughout the councilors talking about 150 million, 300 million. That's what's going to cost the taxpayers. You looked at what Gold cost 2018, and then Glasgow, they paid, it was just over 100 million. But we are forgetting the private sector here. We have a private sector that is willing to help and to contribute to the city. And we all forget. We're all forgetting the real reason. We're going to have buildings that we need. Nobody mentioned about the arena. We got problem with the arena. How much is it going to cost? We have aquatics, and we want a multi-sport complex. Those building in its own warrants $100 million, if you think about it. 3, 4, 5 buildings. I don't understand why we are not moving forward when we have the private sector here saying that they are part of this. And so for me to say, you know, the projective, what are the projective? New facilities, social benefits, we have all that. And for someone to say that sports is just sports, it's not true. I want to tell you, there is proven that moving our body, exercise, helps. Have you ever heard of the magic pill? It is exercise. If you exercise, you feel better. Mental illness, exercise, you do feel better. So we're saying we want a healthy city. We're saying we want a city that is moving. And then we're saying, no, we'll put that aside. It's going to cost us $150 to $300 million. It is not true. Read what the report said. They only spent over 100. And you don't know, for in-kind, if the Hamilton decides they have land, and we give in-kind, could be a lot less. But I think we should let the 100 committee do their work, come up with the plan, and they have. I know them. I know PJ. I know all of them. And they're hardworking people that want the city to grow. And I think, and nobody forgot that that's the 100th year. 2030 will be 100th year. What great legacy that we bring it back here. I've read the report over, and you know, we're going to have 6,000 athletes. You know, we're going to have a village where they're hosting. It's going to be so exciting. Sometimes we look at the problem and we go, too much money, but we have the private sector here helping us. I really think we should move forward if we can and understand and read it again. You know, I read it and I thought how exciting to have all these people coming here in Hamilton for the 100th year. Remember, it's 100th year. Look at Jimmy Thompson Pool when it started, 1930. The games were at Ira Wynn Stadium. Nobody talks about that. Listen, I care for the city. I care for affordable housing. I care for people that need our help. But this is where it's at. We want to lift people up. And I believe, look at the NBA, all the people going crazy about the NBA. Isn't it exciting in Toronto? Look at the golf, how exciting it is. We want, I can't say I want this. I want to move it forward. And if the federal, and if the provincial, and if the private sector doesn't come through, then we'll stop it. But I believe with all my heart, the private sector is not only a try, it's a 4. It's the provincial, the federal, the city, and the private sector. This is what it is. And let's call it a spade a spade. Let's not throw figures out, 300 million. I saw something that said it's going to cost $1 billion. Well, we're getting help from the federal, from the provincial, from the city, from the private sector. Let's call it like it is. And for me, this is important. It really is, because I know what exercise does. I want to share a story. I had a niece hooked on drugs till she was 30 years old. 4 years ago, she went out west to get help. You know what she got hooked on? Exercise. I should bring her here. Her life changed completely. Completely. She has a nursing degree now. She is unbelievable. She has 3 children, and she is amazing. And you know what took her off the drugs? Exercise. So this is my passion, because I know it helps. There was a study done at St. Joseph that exercise, it was a suicide prevention, and I was there helping them. And you know, they've proven that the exercise has helped those people lift their head up, and all of a sudden, they're worth something. Sports is important. Physical activity is important. And we're not saying it's all because of sport. We're doing affordable housing. I know PJ right there. He cares for that. He's willing to do that. So let's get on board and let's get the 100, get working, and bring us more reports so we can agree with it. Thank you.
You went over your 5 minutes, but you were so passionate, I let you go. There we go. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Could I move the recommendation to get it on the floor? I don't think that's been done yet. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then just a quick comment, and I appreciate Esther's, Councillor Paul's passion. I think we all agree that an active, healthy, vibrant, engaged citizens is good. And, you know, the legacies out of these games is all about what gets left behind. So I have to be honest with you, Pan Am, notwithstanding the stadium difficulties, we would never have funded a stadium replacement on our own in the absence of games. Would never have happened. So we would still be sitting with a stadium that we would have either had to refurbish to the tune of, as I recall, it's some $90 million, or replace to the tune of $180+ million. So it is all about the legacy at the end of the day, whether it's housing legacy or whether it's you know, an aquatic facility that we've long pined for, and McMaster has certainly been part of that. Whether it's an additional you know, sports facility. All of those are long-lasting legacy benefits, not unlike the original Empire Loyalist games that brought us Ivor Stadium, Jimmy Thompson Pool, that are still serving our community. The HAAA grounds back in the day was part of the Empire Loyalist games back then in 1930. And those facilities have served this community for the better part of 80 or 90 years. And so we're looking at a horizon of benefit that goes out to the next 100 years, certainly the way they build facilities today. So I see every opportunity, especially when the private sector comes to be a partner in this process. You know, that's not, we had private sector partnership, but all the previous bids were led by the City of Hamilton. We now have a private consortium that says we are going to put our time, effort, resources into trying to secure this for the City of Hamilton for those long-term benefits. And yes, it'll be a couple of weeks of entertainment in terms of sports. It'll be many years of inspiration for our local athletes to actually aspire. Not unlike Canusa Games, that's been going on to some 50+ years. They inspire our young people to be active. The very, very public health issue that we are continuing to pursue, you know, on a regular basis to get people moving in our community, and to have the aspiration of being a Commonwealth participant is inspiring for a lot of young athletes that want to be part of not only the training and the opportunity to participate in the sport, but to have an aspiration to participate at the highest level possible. And so, you know, sports has been, continues to be, you know, and as Esther points out, you know, just look at what's going on with the Raptors. And we don't have a Raptors team in Hamilton, but the entire country is now captivated by what's going on in Toronto and the Raptors and what they're doing. And when the Bulldogs are on, everybody's excited. But the legacy is what gets left behind. And housing is a very critical piece of that. So thank you to Councilor Marula for putting in that addition. I think it's part of a games process in any event. And if we can do that and have that be a lasting legacy for residents that we know are now short of housing, what an added benefit that would be for our broader community. And another opportunity to have a legacy that will last 100 years or more. So I'm fully supportive of continuing to explore, to continue to move forward on this. Clearly, we need federal and provincial partners, and Pan Am would not have happened without the feds and the province stepping up. They did, for all the right reasons. They broadened out the games, in fact, to include, you know, Toronto and Mississauga and Vaughan and all the other communities, and all had legacy benefits that came out of the Pan Am Games, and I think that was a wise decision on their part, and certainly it could be part of an evolution that could happen here as well, even though it might be our bid. Certainly Burlington and Brantford and other communities surrounding us would obviously look for potential benefit and may become partners in this as well. So there's nothing but opportunity here. Of course, we have to be careful. Of course, the dollars matter. It always does. But we shouldn't forget about the benefits that will endure for the next 80 to 100 years. So I fully support this. I appreciate the private sector partners coming forward. They're all very committed Hamiltonians that have not only a passion for what they do in our community, but for what they bring to our community and what our community will be in the future. And this is really what we're talking about here, is how do we build into this opportunities that will be a lasting legacy that will live long beyond all of us that are sitting around this table. So I thank them for that. I thank them for that great effort, and I thank our staff for bringing this forward, and I fully support moving forward on this.
Thank you. Councillor Farr.
I think the mayor just pretty much said it all in a profound way. So it's appreciated, I'm sure, by our friends in the gallery and certainly by me. And I'll just echo the final bit there. And all I really wanted to say was thanks to Hamilton 100. Not every city has a crew like Hamilton 100. In fact, probably very few have folks in the business and sport community that they can regularly count on. This is just the latest effort, clearly a collective effort in a very big way, bigger than most, and certainly I'll appreciate moving forward the updates that are obviously going to come both to this horseshoe and to the broader Hamilton community. But it is quite clear here today, and I'm sure they'll be pleased to see the vote as they're about to clear the first hurdle in this steeplechase of effort to get that 100th anniversary back in the hammer. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Was Councillor Partridge before me first time?
This is on the report, though. This is everybody's first time.
Sorry, thank you. So my trepidations, and I appreciate the passion from Councillor Pauls. We can't rely on one report about one successful bid. Currently, 2022 bid, Birmingham, England, they're in a lot of hot water. They're short. They were required 180 million pounds, which is $300 million. That's what they had to come up with. They're short 84 million currently, which means they're short $143 million. So that's a current bid that's under operation, and Commonwealth Games is trying to deal with that situation. And it was already stripped from Durban, South Africa, to be given to Birmingham. So we need to go in with our eyes wide open. I think everyone here is a cheerleader to have successful games. We all had fun at the Pan Am Games, but we need to do our homework. We need to make sure that we can afford it, and we can't go in blindly assuming that the private sector is going to cough up $300 million, because that's not going to happen. We will be on the hook for money, and we just need to know how much.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you. And I do appreciate the comments around the table. Certainly the comments were supportive of what we've got here. But I appreciate the last speaker because, we will do our due diligence on this. The fact that we have that affordable housing component is extremely important to this city, absolutely critical. So I want to thank the councillor for including that amendment. And also the fact that the MOU is coming back here. Now, based on those two things alone, I can support moving forward to the next stage. But that allows us the opportunity to be able to do our due diligence, as was previously said. And folks, we have no idea at this point what the provincial government downloading is going to be over the next 3 years. And yeah, maybe it'll be all uploaded again by 2030. That's what tends to happen. 10 years that down, 10 years up it goes again. So, but I'm very concerned that the health of this city is on a good foundation going forward. When we finish this term of council, if none of us are back in the next, 3-4 terms, I want to know that we have left this city healthy and it's on a secure footing. So we do have some things we're going to have to deal with. And if we are going to get a new arena, God help us on the whole discussion of where that's going to be located. Anyway, I guess we will deal with that. So I will support it at this point only because it's going to be again coming back to us for the phase 2 considerations. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we've got the report in front of you as amended and the arena going in Glanbrook. All those in favor, vote. Appreciate your support, folks. Oh, I forgot to get a second. Thank you very much, everyone. And I was remiss to not ask for receiving of Carrie's presentation. Councillor Partridge, or sorry, Councillor Pearson, Councillor Vanderbeek, all those in favor? Receiving, thank you. Thank you, folks. You don't have to stick around. So now we're on to 9.2, Downtown Entertainment Assets Operating Agreements. John Hertel and Ryan McHugh are coming down. Please remind yourselves that if the committee wishes to discuss the confidential appendices G and H to this report, we will need to go into closed session to do so. I almost got the arena.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and members of committee, for allowing Ryan and I an opportunity to present our recommendation for the extensions of the contracts for Carmen's Group for the Convention Center and Global Spectra, as we'll call them in short form, for the Arena, First Ontario Centre, and the First Ontario Concert Hall. I would have to start off by saying throughout the number of days and weeks of the negotiation, our current partners have shown every strong indication possible that they wish to continue to work with us, to not only in the new recommended term, the 5-year term, bring us additional financial benefits, as well as to continue to bring great events, trade shows, conventions, entertainment, and fabulous performances of both sport and entertainment to our venues. And I see that they're all well represented here this morning, so thank you very much for coming out. In the spirit, actually, of partnership, I did want to put in a plug for there's a lot of reference to the Raptors this morning, and I want to put in a plug that at no cost to the general public, including, of course, members of committee and the mayor, that they're welcome to come over to First Ontario Centre this evening for 2 free events. The first event is the Honey Badgers, our Hamilton basketball team, Honey Badgers basketball game against the Guelph. And then that starts at 7 o'clock, the doors open at 6. Then we are going to show on a gigantic HD quality video screen, we will be showing the Raptors game, and we would also encourage the public to bring a non-perishable food item as well to contribute. So lots of action, lots of exciting things going on tonight, and that's not why you invited me here to this morning, so I'll carry on. What we're going to do, first of all, I'd like to clarify, because there's a lot going on downtown right now with the various reports and studies. So this particular presentation is specifically about the contract extensions and our recommendations for our operators of those venues. There's a second piece of work under the leadership of Glenn Norton's team. Ryan is also very involved in that, which is about the hall redevelopment. So that we will see another day. In fact, I believe in August you'll be seeing a report coming back on that. So this is strictly about the extensions. The way that we'll handle it this morning is that I'm going to turn the first half of the presentation over to Ryan, and he'll summarize the first 5 years, I'll call it, and then I'll come back and present the highlights of the second 5 years.
Sorry, we did that because the bright light that's coming through on the it's seriously right. I'm sorry for the distractions, John. It was right there.
I was worried that, it was
No,
something
no,
going
no
on
broccoli in
here.
the teeth. You're doing good.
So thank you very much, and I'm going to hand it over to Ryan.
Thank you very much, John. So as John had mentioned before, we talk about the recommendation that's in front of you. We're just going to provide a quick little snapshot of the timeline of how we got to where we are today. Starting in 2011, up until these contracts were awarded in March of 2013, the city undertook what was called at the time the HEC-FI review, so looking at the operations of the HEC-FI, which existed at that time. And this was done in 3 phases. The first phase was an operational review, and this was led by KPMG at the time. The second phase was a competitive RFP process to look for operators potentially interested in operating one or all of the assets. And the third phase led to the ultimate recommendation, which was adopted by the council at that time, to award the contracts to the 2 operators we're discussing today. And since that time in 2013, we're very pleased to say that the city has benefited from over $10 million in operating savings versus the existing HEC-FI model. So we'll certainly speak to the new deal and additional savings above and beyond that, but up to this date as staff, we view this as quite the success story. I won't speak to this long, but just as a reference, these are the specifications of the facilities, and they're outlined more in additional detail in the report. So in 2013, when these deals were awarded, as you're well aware, the Carmen's Group operates the Hamilton Convention Center, and they were awarded a 5-year deal with a city option of a second 5-year renewal, and that's what we're discussing today. The format of their deal was a declining subsidy, where in the early years of the contract, we actually provided a net contribution to the Carmen's Group. In the past 2 years, they've actually provided a contribution to the city. And I'll break that down in more detail in the coming slides. With regards to Global Spectrum, so they operate, as you're aware, the First Ontario Centre and the First Ontario Concert Hall. That was also a 5-year deal with a 5-year option for renewal, which again, we're considering today. As opposed to the nature of the Carmen's agreement, which was a declining subsidy. This deal was a flat subsidy with the opportunity for a profit share as they succeeded financially. And in the last 2 years, and I'll break down the detail of that, we have benefited from that mechanism and seen that subsidy be reduced. Looking at the highlights of Global Spectrum's first term, so in terms of events per year, they have about 200 events in the facility and have about just under 500,000 people come through the doors every year. So that's quite a few people using our downtown, our bars, our restaurants, and exploring Hamilton more broadly. When you look at some of the headliners that have went through there, some very big impressive names: Elton John, Paul McCartney, even the Tragically Hip on their farewell tour when Gord Downey before he passed away. That was quite a special moment for a lot of Hamiltonians. And the other event, which I feel I should suggest, was last year. They had a Korean pop band, K-pop, as it's referred to, called BTS. At the time, honestly, didn't know who or what they were, but the good thing is Global Spectrum did, and they made sure that when they did go on their North American tour, their lone Canadian stop was here in Hamilton for 5 shows. And that brought in waves and waves of K-pop fans. I have pictures later in the presentation of people lining up, camping on the streets in anticipation to attend the shows. In addition to the big concerts, this venue, especially the First Ontario Centre specifically, it really enables us as the City of Hamilton to host big events such as the Junos and the CCMAs. And as the operator of the facility, Spectra's day-to-day operations really enables that to make sure that goes off without a hitch and really showcases the Hamilton community. And they also have a number of anchor tenants, so can't go throughout this presentation without mentioning the Hamilton Bulldogs, who are the OHL champions in 2018. And as John had mentioned, we have a new anchor tenant at our First Ontario Centre, the Hamilton Honey Badgers, which is a new franchise in the Canadian Elite Basketball League. And as John had said tonight, free event, one time only, 7 o'clock against the Guelph. I believe they're the Nighthawks, they're called. So if you come for the game at 7, it's free admission, and you can stay and watch the Toronto Raptors battle it out in Game 3 of the NBA Finals. And also, finally, the Hamilton Philharmonic as the anchor tenant of the concert hall. Global Spectrum has done quite a bit to work with them to help them to grow their audience base as they're really trying to reach out throughout the community and get that next generation of patron, which they've had a lot of success with. Just a few visuals. The first on the left was of that BTS concert, and that was widely covered throughout the news media, and even just the buzz around our downtown core was incredible. And that's not just lining up for the concert itself. It was people in tents camping out well in advance of these events. And as I spoke to the NBA Finals viewing party, on very short notice, Carmen's was able to work with the Honey Badgers to open the doors of the First Ontario Centre on Sunday. So that picture shows you that was very well attended. And they really are a very nimble partner in that regard. And when a need comes up, they've always rallied around the table to meet it. And that is despite the fact a few of the gentlemen up here are 76ers fans, and I know they're still stinging about that loss to the Raptors in the second round. From a financial perspective, so with regards to the Spectrum agreement specifically, we've saved $4.65 million at these facilities versus the comparable operation at the HEC-FI model. If you include the capital contribution, which Spectra has made into the facility of $500,000 over this term, that number goes north of $5 million in additional benefit. They have over 203 events per year. This, I believe, is even going up because they've had quite a bit of success last year. And also they have so just south of 500,000 guests coming through the facility. To break down the financials in a little more detail, you'll see the level of operating subsidy we provided. I think the main takeaway from this chart is that our baseline operating subsidy is $1.4 million, but as they have financial success, there's mechanisms for us to share in that as the city and reduce that further. And that started to creep up in 2017, where you saw the subsidy reduce by $100,000. And in 2018, Global Spectrum had an amazing year, and we saw that subsidy was reduced all the way from $1.4 million to $750,000. And speaking with the team at Global Spectrum, they're having another very solid year, shaping up in 2019. So we expect to see profit sharing again this year. In addition to the operating subsidy, we also, as the city, subsidized the first $1.2 million in utility costs. So if you look at the total net contribution to those facilities, it's as high as $2.6 million, and in recent years, as low as $2.15 million. Switching over to the Carmen's Group now, quite a few highlights from them as well, as they've also had a very successful run. When you look at their list of conventions and conferences they hosted over the years, a very, very diverse list. It's everything I saw last year. It was a steep tea convention. One was I think it was the Ontario Association of Funerals and Cemeteries Professionals. So any reason why people feel they need to meet, Carmen's Group is working hard to make sure they do that in Hamilton, so our hotels or restaurants benefit. In addition to conferences, they also host a number of galas. The top left-hand corner, you'll see a picture of the Dreamcatcher Gala, which traditionally they've hosted in the facility. Unfortunately, through no fault of the Carmen's Group, the group that runs this event had constructed their own facility. So moving forward, this is a loss, something that we won't be able to benefit as the city of Hamilton. And John's going to speak a little bit in his slides about the financial impact of that loss of that one event. But really, in addition to soliciting quite a bit of new business, when it comes to events like the Junos, the CCMAs, and even the Vanier Cup, Carmen's has been really great at stepping up during those week of type events. So that's the industry nights for the Junos and the CCMAs, and the player awards banquets for the Vanier Cup. And that really allows us to extend those events from a one night affair to a full week of celebration and economic uplift. And I'd also want to mention them. Not only are they great stewards of the facility, also do quite a bit of community work here in the community. One that I know PJ and team is very proud of is partnering with the Good Shepherd. They fed 300,000 people at their Winter Wonderland event. Sorry, 3,000. That would have been quite remarkable. I think 3,000 is in its own. So 3,000 people. And also, the list of things they support is very long. Very quickly, they made a $25,000 contribution to the Hamilton sign, which sits out in front of us here in the courtyard. And what a transformational impact that's had on that space. So you see people constantly taking selfies, interacting with it. Even after the graduations, you see that as a backdrop for pictures. In addition to things like the Music Mondays, the seating that we have out there now, really that has become a community gathering space. And this contribution and that Hamilton sign really was one of the catalysts of that development. And last but not least, we have the Hamilton Cardinals, which are part of the Inter-County Baseball League. So they've played in Hamilton for decades now. And last year, they were actually finding themselves in a little bit of financial trouble, which really had their ownership questioning should they remain in Hamilton. So PJ and team rallied, the community stepped up and bought an ownership stake in the team, put them on firm financial footing. Last year, they actually, I believe, made it to the playoffs and had an upset in the first round, won a first playoff series in years. So hopefully they're here for the enjoyment of the Hamilton community for decades to come. Looking at the financials of the Carmen's Group deal, so we've benefited from $4.7 million in operating savings versus the HEC-FI model. Carmen's Group has also made $750,000 worth of capital investments in upgrading that facility, so a net benefit of over $5,000 versus what we would have had in place from HEC-FI. They have 142 events per year, which utilization rate approaching 40%, which is excellent for a facility such as the one they operate, and about 86,000 guests pouring through that facility each year. From a subsidy standpoint, I won't walk through this in great detail, but really there is, if you bring your attention to the very rightward column, in the year 2013, which was the transition year where they took over operation in March, the city provided a subsidy which included operating and utility of $545,000. That subsidy has declined to a point where last year they made a net contribution to the city of $165,000. So this is something, this subsidy reduction story, something they're very proud of, and as staff, we view it as a great success story. With that, without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to John Hertel to talk about the recommendation that's in place and how we feel our forecast would show this would reduce the subsidy further in the coming years.
Thank you, Ryan. And I should clarify, I know Ryan gave the Carmen's Group the credit for setting up the Raptors basketball thing. That actually was our friends. They're sitting, the nice thing is they're sitting so close together that they're almost one organization now. So maybe just to highlight the terms of the proposed New Deal. And I guess I would preface by saying it's important to keep in mind that the summary that Ryan just gave was compared to the first, or within the first 5 years compared to the former HEC-FI starting point. So in total, just a bit over $10 million in value to the city for that change. And this proposal that we're reviewing now is incremental benefit to the city as well. So it's not starting over again, it's building on that momentum. So for the Global Spectrum deal, the proposal is a 5-year and 6-month transition period, given that we are in the middle of the year right now. So it would expire at the end of December in 2024. From a one-time capital perspective, it's a really interesting enhancement where they have worked with their food and beverage partner. They've been in place for quite some time, Compass Group, that operates the food and beverage for the venues today. Compass Group has also offered up to participate. So there would be $500,000 coming upon signing from Global Spectrum, and the Compass Group have agreed to also kick in $550,000. And I'll show you in a moment where some of that would likely be spent. And the Compass Group's contribution is broken down just slightly, so $500,000 in year 1, and then another $50,000 in year 3. So a total then of over $1 million in new capital monies to be put into the venues from the partners. The financial terms, so the baseline stays the same, the $1.4 million as it was before, but the formula for then us recognizing benefit has changed in favor, say, over the previous arrangement for the city, given the forecast that we have looked at based on a 3-year rolling average of their performance. So there's a $350,000 management fee, which is reduced by $100,000. So the previous management fee was $450,000. And we have a different incentive model. So when performance, if you think of 1.4 as a subsidy, and when their performance is better than the 1.4 million, the city would receive the initial $350,000. The next $400,000 would be split 50-50, and any further subsidy reduction beyond that would be a 60-40 split in favor of the city. Now, this is an interesting time, certainly for all of us, with many unknowns. The venues are older and older each year. There are challenges we know in the arena with potential, emphasize potential for things like the brine lines. We know that as operators of downtown venues, there is an interest, I'll say, in the impacts of LRT as it comes down the road. What does that mean? So we're very pleased to work out a plan with our partners at Global Spectrum that for their portion of their incentive money, up to $200,000 a year based on performance, it would essentially go into a reserve. And this would start immediately. So then if somewhere along the line, I'll say, God forbid, that 3 years down the road, the brine lines go down, we have to shut down the arena for 4 or 5 months to do the complete repair, then financial losses that they would potentially feel the impact of at that time, we would draw from this pool that we're building up, or the reserve, to cover off those losses. So it's a protection mechanism for the city. So very quickly then, if I look at the comparison of the first 5 years versus the proposed 5 years, from a capital point of view, the initial deal contributed $500,000 in capital. As I just mentioned, the new term would propose $1,050,000, which is obviously a significant capital improvement. The annual operating subsidy on average was 1.2 or almost 1.3 million in the first 5 years, based on their last couple of years of, quote, profit sharing, if I can call it that. The forecast going forward is that the average would be based on the averages, would be an average subsidy of 1.06 million. In other words, a $229,000 per year improvement. And if you look at the notes below, that would indicate that during the period of 5 years, there would be incremental operating subsidy reduction of $1.146 million on top of what we have received so far. I just wanted to show a couple of slides that point to some initial thoughts on where some of the capital dollars would go. So everyone agrees, and certainly the performers and artists agree, that the former Hamilton Place, now the First Ontario Concert Hall, is the jewel. Acoustically, still one of the best in the country. And the area that the team would see the most potential uplift in terms of growth of performances and related revenue streams is in the concert hall. And if you recall the last time you went into the concert hall, that the foyer, from its origin, takes up a tremendous amount of space just for a coat check room. So the notion would be that would all be, I'll say, gutted and renovated. They would add food and beverage facilities in there. So not only in the foyer for events, et cetera, but in the side rooms, so the studio theater, some of the meeting rooms down the hall. And also, as you can see in the, I'll say, the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, you can see the second floor VIP lounge, which again today does not have its own cooking facility, so there would be an opportunity to invest heavily there. In addition to this focus, of course, there would be a refresh of the concession stands, and particularly in the technology supporting the concession stands at the arena itself. So let me turn, please, to the Carmen's Group proposed deal. And as Ryan indicated, in the first 5 years, they certainly helped us to the tune of greater than $5 million between operating and capital. This particular proposal, we've tried to find a balance between operating and capital, and the Carmen's Group has found a way to commit to $500,000 in additional capital for the facility, with the first year be a $300,000 contribution, and then $50,000 per year for the next 4 years. If you look at the chart below, the proposal is that, and I wanted to mention specifically to a point that Ryan had made, that the Dreamcatchers event each year, and from my time at HACFA, I know can confirm that that one event would represent approximately 20 to 25% of revenue and margin for the facility. And they decided that they had the wherewithal resource-wise to go and build their own facility to host their event. So that event now, unfortunately, is permanently lost from the downtown area and from the revenue streams of Carmen's Group. So what we've proposed is that in combination, I'll say, to recognize that short-term hit, plus the fact that they have committed to adding 2 additional salespeople to focus on the convention center with conventions and trade shows, et cetera, we've suggested an operating one-time subsidy in 2020 of $100,000, and then you can see that on the right-hand side of the page, there's an increase each year in the contribution that they would make towards the utilities. So the bottom line for the 5-year term would be, on an operating level, $162,500. And let me just translate that one more. I should mention also that they've been open to the idea and have proposed to us that when their revenues hit the $4 million mark, that they would actually increase their contribution to the utilities to the equivalent of 2%. So to summarize the 2 deals, they put in initially $750,000 worth of capital improvements. They took care of an awful lot of the core requirements, and if you've been to events, you know over the last few years how much of that has improved the patron experience, the diners experience, et cetera, and it looks great. They're proposing that the $500,000 would continue with that plan. From a net operating point of view, if you take the entire 5 years behind us, the average contribution that the city made in operating was $800, sorry. This new term, it'd actually be a net contribution in the 5-year term on an average of $32,000 per year. So per year, another plus for the city of $83,000. Multiply that by the 5-year term, and you'll see at the bottom that would translate into a forecasted $416,000 in additional operating contribution, plus of course, the $500,000 in capital. So that's the quick presentation, and if I can, I'll just summarize very briefly the 2 deals. So from the Global Spectrum or Spectra perspective, the forecasted improvement deal over deal is $1.146 million in operating benefits to the city and $1.05 million in capital contribution. And the Carmen's deal would propose an incremental $416,000 in reduced operating subsidy, plus a $500,000 contribution to capital. So just under $1 million, again, from the Carmen's Group as well.
Thank you. And before we go to questions, I'm going to remind everyone again that if you wish to discuss any of the confidential appendices G and H, we need to go in camera. But I'm a little confused. I've read both the appendices, and I don't see much that's left over. So John and Ryan, I'll leave it up to you to police yourselves, and then you feel free to say this is an in-camera item when the question arises.
If I may, through the Deputy Mayor, through the advice of the solicitor, she would recommend that we have, it could be quite a brief conversation, but there is one item within the addendums that we felt it would be important for committee to have the opportunity to discuss because it is for an extended deal period.
So we'll go to questions first, correct? Okay, because we're going to questions. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. So, John, except for that one other component, I'm prepared to support what you have here before us today. So is there any real need to go in camera, Madam Deputy Mayor? Because you're talking about the extended 5-year period today publicly, correct, John, for both entities? Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor?
Through the Deputy Mayor, the in-camera portion is a slightly enhanced proposal for an extended agreement beyond just 5 years.
So, John, do we need to, so help us out. Do we need to deal with that today? Or is that something, if we wanted to go in camera, Madam Deputy Mayor, we could hear and listen about and talk about, but if we don't want to, we can move on with the next 5 years today? Can you help clarify that for me, please?
Our city solicitor would like to chime in.
Please, Nicole?
Sure. Through you, Deputy Mayor, to the councillor. So it's important to keep the two things separate. So the public recommendation and the presentation are separate. There is a separate item in the in-camera discussion. If you wish to go with the public recommendation, that's one thing. If you want to have a discussion about what's in the in-camera section, we can do that. They don't necessarily have to interact unless council wants them to.
Thank you. So we'll make that decision after, if you want.
Thanks, City Solicitor. John, so is there this in-camera, I'm sorry, Madam, I'm not trying to be pedantic about this.
Pedantic? Okay.
Look that word, Google that word real fast. Madam Deputy Mayor, through you, John, is there anything about the in-camera piece that potentially affects what you have publicly presented and are recommending? Because if it isn't, I want to move forward today. But if there's something there I need to know, because it may affect what you've just presented publicly, well, then obviously we should be going in camera. Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, please.
Through the Deputy Mayor, what I could say, Councillor, is that the in-camera portion, if approved by committee, has enhanced financial benefit to the city. But it comes with a caveat that legal services keep reminding me of.
So if we don't go in camera today, Madam Deputy Mayor, and we just want to move on and accept what you're, if the majority of us want to accept what you're recommending, can we deal with that enhancement somewhere in the next 5 years? Madam Deputy Mayor, through to John.
Legal services are shaking their heads no.
So we have to deal with that today, through you to the City Solicitor. We must deal with the in-camera portion today, Madam Deputy Mayor. Through
City
to Nicole.
solicitor.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So no, councillor, what I heard your question being is if you wanted to consider some of the options that are presented in the in-camera portion within the next 5 years, the answer is no. If you do not need to deal with them today. They are separate proposals. You can go with the public recommendation, or you can consider what's in camera. And really, if we're going to get into that, if it's going to be a benefit to committee, I'm happy to go in camera and we can have a brief discussion. Otherwise, the two things are separate, and committee can choose which way they would like to go.
So, thank you, Nicole. So, John, if they're both separate, and we want to move on with what you have presented publicly for the 14th time, I'll ask this. Will you bring back the in-camera portion somewhere within this term of council? So we could discuss whatever that enhancement potentially is for the future that is not impacting the 5-year renewal package you've presented here today. Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
So through the Deputy Mayor, the one thing that I would say, Councillor, is that if Council or committee ultimately decided to go with what's been identified in the in-camera portion, that would actually enhance the current proposal for 5 years to some degree as well.
Okay, Madam Deputy Mayor, I still want to ask questions, but I think we should be going in camera, because if we're potentially enhancing what has been presented here today, which means enhancing to me means favorable impact for our citizens and taxpayers. I mean, geez, in my opinion, we should hear that.
Right.
Okay.
That's why we have an in-camera item.
Thank you for
Go
that
ahead for
affirmative
being
nod,
pedantic.
Madam Deputy Mayor. Thank
We
you.
looked up the,
All right. Okay. Okay. Oh, you Googled it. Thank you. All right.
yes, and your picture is on it.
All right. All right. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, now, Ward 11 and 6 get along so well normally. Okay. So, John, I just want to make some comments publicly, though, before we are going to go in. Sounds like we'll go in camera to hear about potential enhancements. Madam Deputy Mayor, what needs to be said is, let's rewind the clock. 2011, we who were on council then, and John, you were just in a short sojourn, I'll call it, with HECFI. One of the best things former city manager Chris Murray did was retain you with the corporation of the city of Hamilton. You know I mean that sincerely. The former board, executive director, they brought forward what used to be a $5 to $6 million annual subsidy request. That last year was an $11 million request. Councilor Marula put the brakes on his Chevy and said, hold it, this is ridiculous, we got to stop this, we need to have a serious talk. And a few months later, we dissolved HECFI, we brought it in-house, brought John Hertel and his brains with us to the finance department. Former Mayor Bob Bertina as well supported the dissolution, and we brought it in-house. And here we are with two wonderful private sector partners, John, in the community that have been good to their word and beyond and have saved taxpayers money, have enhanced from a capital standpoint the buildings. It's just been a remarkable story. So I want to congratulate Global Spectrum. I want to congratulate the Carmen's Group. And I want to congratulate the unofficial arrangement that they've had in working in tandem to enhance the downtown and enhance amenities and attractions for our city overall, because they both bring tremendous credibility to the table. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, mine were more comments and kudos. And John, to your credit and the team you've developed, people like Ryan, you've developed a wonderful team that has always, you've had your eye on the ball, and both from a community standpoint and a fiscal standpoint, you have met tremendous goals and targets for us. I would love to, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, to John, I know Jasper Kajewski has done some incredible studies about the future of First Ontario Centre Arena. I'm curious, and if it's not for today, for former Mayor Deanne and the executive of Global Spectrum, I'd love to know their thoughts on the future of First Ontario Centre Arena. I know Jasper's done incredible studies saying short-term, you could spend this amount, long-term, you really need to do this, or the third option being demolish, do something different. But John, given Global Spectrum, they're in the business of arenas, to my knowledge, especially in the US. I've often wondered what their commentary, not asking you to speak for them, but could you give us some essence of what their commentary would be as to what maybe the community and council ultimately should do with that facility? And that's my question. Those were all my comments, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Through you. John?
Yes, through the Deputy Mayor, I think it would be fair to say that one thing that has made them stand out as a partner is that they've never said a negative thing about that facility. They have, I'll say, shined it up, used it for what it is, and found the best parts of it that exist actually in this venue that don't exist in many other venues in terms of the flexibility of the space to use it for load in, load out, the tremendous quality of the staff itself. And you know, I would have to say that they've really stepped it up in terms of the appearance of the facility. It has, I mean, it's an aging facility for sure, and it has its potential challenges certainly in the future with the brine lines, et cetera. One of the things that I think they would say is that the size of the facility today has enabled them in their partnership with Live Nation, and we wanted to make sure we put Live Nation on the slide because it's a formal arrangement between Global Spectrum and Live Nation. That through that partnership, they've been able to bring acts, excuse me, to the city where they would, I'll say, sell way beyond the lower bowl, and that is to the tune of at least a dozen per year and climbing. And we would not necessarily have even access to those acts if we didn't have a facility of that size. The other thing they would also say, I believe, is that they're very accustomed to working with facilities this age and newer. I think they're in 300 plus locations around the world, so they got lots of comparators, and therefore make themselves very available to be part of the input for what a new or revised arena could look like and why. So they would offer their expertise corporately and locally to make that happen. The one thing too that is a consideration that they've shared with me, so I'm not making this up, I'll say, or it's not my opinion only, that our proximity to Toronto will always be on the table for discussion. So even if we had a big, shiny new arena, it does not guarantee that if you build it, they will come. Seems to me we thought that with the NHL. But what it does certainly is to enhance the experience. There would be additional revenue streams, et cetera. But Toronto still is where, if a group's going to go through Canada, play our top 5 cities, they're going to spend 2 or perhaps longer period of time in Toronto rather than go Toronto for a show and here for a show. And there are reasons why we have been successful through Global Spectrum of attracting events that BTS is a great example, Paul McCartney is a great example. It relies heavily on their relationships with their promoters. That's a long answer that's not telling you a lot of detail, but I would say that they have done a great deal to support the venue as it is and take advantage of what it is. So, small example, when we do the first responders annual hockey game recognition each year. This year, as you know, we're able to move the boards back because there was this space there with the seats that retract to then put all the vehicles right along, the ice level, I'll say. So there are a lot of flexible things about that arena. You can never forget it's getting very old and that it needs some repair, which is underway. And it will need either to be very refreshed, such as the BBB proposals that we saw last year, or rebuilt at some point. But in the meantime, they're committed to operating it for what it is.
Thank you. Councilor?
John, that's a tremendous answer with tremendous insight, and I really appreciate that because I was going to assume to my question you were going to say, Councillor, I really can't speak for them, but you gave a really good 10-minute summary of exactly,
Exceeded my 5 minutes.
No, sincerely, you gave a wonderful summary of what is, and the fact that all the negativity we've heard about First Ontario Arena, Madam Deputy Mayor, the fact that they want to renew for at least another 5 years is a message to me in itself, because they manage and own and operate a multitude of other arenas across North America, and you said the world, and I would have thought that they, after 5 years, if this arena wasn't worth maintaining, they would have hightailed it out of here and said, forget about any renewals, Mr. Hertel. We've been happy to be in Hamilton, Madam Deputy Mayor, but we're moving on. So to me, that's a message in itself, and today's not the day for it, John, but just to wrap up, that's my dilemma. I know where Mr. Andlauer wants to be with the smaller arena, and I just worry that we're going to lose the ability to attract those acts, those events that you've talked about with the 17,500-seat arena, but we can't forget about Mr. Andlauer either. Thanks for your indulgence, Madam Deputy Mayor, and it sounds like we will be going in camera after all. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. And to use Councillor Jackson's expression, I will be pedantic. I have a question with regards to the reconciliation of the original motion that was passed by Council in, when was it, January 16th, that talked about potential divestment and having an independent study conducted to look at a plethora of options. And how does that match with a 5 and possibly a 5+5 deal?
Through the Deputy Mayor, obviously that was a major part of our conversations as well. And I guess I would respond in a couple of ways. First of all, we would build into the agreement what I would call off-ramp language. So in the same way, but on a much larger scale, of course, we would have, compared to what we have today, off-ramp information if the NHL were to come. So we built into the existing management agreement that should an NHL team come to Hamilton, this is what would happen. There's a formula for, I'll say, managing investments, et cetera. The notion being, I think, that given the very broad study that is going on, that Glenn Norton and Ryan and team are working on, that there's a really good chance that it would be, I'll say, 5 years before a shovel goes in the ground or a bulldozer arrives, but not necessarily. So therefore, we need to incorporate the language, but they felt very confident that they wanted to stay invested. And depending on the stages of construction that ultimately would take place, we would deal with at that point in time. Let's say that we're, in year 4 and something happens, then we would need language in the final agreements that talk about what we would do.
Okay, but we don't have that language currently.
No, and through the Deputy Mayor, that would be if a committee approves the framework for the agreement today, then our recommendations are that we then complete the detailed language in a form that the city manager and city solicitor agree, and then the mayor and clerks would sign off on. An option certainly would be to bring those details back to committee.
So can I ask the status on the independent study?
Sure. So through the chair, we had an RFP close, it would have been over a month ago. So we've hired Ernst & Young. So their team has been working with us quite diligently over the last month. That scope of work is certainly being completed bit by bit. We are forecasting that work will be done with some time in July, with us coming back to council with a presentation by EY and a staff recommendation advising council how we recommend moving forward by August.
And so the natural question for me is then how do I reconcile that with an agreement for an extension of 5 years plus a possible other 5 years without having the language before us explaining the off-ramps and how we continue with the independent study should we choose to divest and build office towers above those buildings? It seems that there's something missing here. Not trying to be pedantic, as my colleague says, but it seems on one hand we've given direction to go down one road, and now we have this other item with a 5 and a 5, and I'm still trying to wrestle with procedurally how do we ensure that the 5 and the 5 doesn't become a fatal flaw to the spending of $200,000 on this independent study, and at the end of the day we can't do anything because we have a 10-year deal.
Through the Deputy Mayor, both parties certainly understand that exact challenge, Councillor, and have agreed that as we work through this, that they would be very comfortable, working with us around language. I certainly appreciate your point that you would fear a collision of ideas without having more definition to what that language is at the time. But I think at this point in time, short term, both parties are comfortable with moving ahead with 5 years with this framework. The language to be completed within the management agreements. And then I think we would see also separately when the report comes from Ryan and Glenn Norton and EY, what their broad view is. And we would need to make sure that the language in the agreement complies or I'll say complements that direction.
So the existing management agreement that is going to be extended doesn't have that language, but council would be approving that extension today.
Through the chair, you're correct. It doesn't have that level of detail. The only thing that is in the current management agreement deals with the NHL. But I would say it's at least a starting point for modeling the language around any other requirements to do with downtown development, other major issues, whether that be to do with the infrastructure itself. I mean, we are comfortable and confident in our discussions and negotiations that we can arrive at that in a manner that is satisfactory to committee, but we'd be happy to adjust our recommendation if committee would prefer to bring back that kind of specificity to committee.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Mr. Hertel. I appreciate it. And Madam Deputy Mayor, the specificity of the language is really important. We don't want to get into a situation where we're in litigation because we haven't clarified on the onset in the management agreement what our opportunities are. And at the present time, we don't have that. And without having that in there, I can't support that, because that'll fly completely against what we already tried to do and we're starting to move forward with. So I appreciate the fact that the NHL is in there. Candidly, I think I'll get hit by lightning before the NHL comes. But my preference would be that the language in that agreement is very clear, that both parties understand with the city that we are going through this independent study and we may choose to divest of these properties. And we need to have that clarification up front before we sign that agreement. Otherwise, I can assure you we're going to be in court.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, perhaps I can assist if of Council Committee would like. So certainly, Councillor, I hear your concern. The current agreement that we have expires shortly, so that language, while in there, and as John mentioned, would form the model, any agreement that we would have would refer to a termination of some sort. So we can certainly address that concern, and if we want to go into more detail around that language when we go on camera, happy to have that conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And so on that question, though, I think that was the intent, is to have that exit strategy language in the agreements, right? So it's a matter of formalizing that. So is it the intent of the councillor to have it brought back here to kind of see the language? I mean, I know and understand that was a requirement I actually suggested earlier on as well, not unlike the NHL. If we go down that road, and actually some of the participants that are in the broader study are actually part of the agreement that we're actually putting forward today. So having that language crystal clear that we have an out, I think, is critically important. So, but you want to see it before we execute the agreement. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. So today, I'm assuming we're making an agreement in principle that has yet to be finalized in terms of language through contract and everything else that has to happen. So, and there's two buckets here. So I'm just going to ask the legal staff here. I mean, what we have before us today is an extension of the original agreement with enhanced benefit to the city.
The Deputy Mayor, that is correct.
So we could easily say that we could approve that, and then whatever the add-on is actually sort of a separate item, quite frankly, that talks about going beyond that, for a future period of time. Isn't that kind of where we're at?
Through the Deputy Mayor, I think what Councillor Clark is suggesting is that even on say, this 5-year deal, we should have the language very clear.
No, I got that, yeah.
In case in year 4 of this 5-year proposal, something is required.
I'm just separating out what we're doing publicly from what we may be looking at in camera. I think they're separate issues. We could approve the agreement that we have before us today on the additional 5 years, I think, very comfortably, or at least in principle, and then go in camera and deal with whatever the add-on is that might come out of that. Am I not correct on that, Madam Solicitor?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, or to the Mayor, yes. I mean, certainly there are two components.
Right.
What I would say, though, and we do need to, there is a bit of a timing issue, and we can explore that a bit more in camera, and particularly if there is particular wording or concerns that committee would like to have addressed in the agreement, we can potentially include that in the motion for today as well, that specific direction.
So I would recommend that we put in the motion, as we approve in principle, the requirement to have the language, the exit strategy language, built into the agreements that come back to council. Let me just say, though, that with the two providers that we have had here, Global Spectrum and Carmen's Group, they have been, as you have indicated, and some of us were, a little bit surprised that we were pulled into potentially a bidding process. they've fulfilled everything that we've asked them to do. They're quality operators. They're not only doing good by our facilities and getting our deficits, annual deficit down, but they're also building in our community a great rapport and great value throughout. So no issue with extending with these two providers. They have done an excellent job and will continue to do an excellent job for the next 5 years. And I really appreciate the work that they put into this, quite frankly. And I think to Councillor Jackson's point, the very fact that they're prepared to stay, and we've had some negative issues, surrounding our arena facility. It is not a terrible facility. It has lots of great qualities. And do we have to make a decision at some point on where we go with that? I think so. But it's not a facility that is derelict by any stretch of the imagination, and has provided great quality resources and talent and entertainment, both on hockey and both on concert entertainments for many decades, and could very well continue to do that into the future. So I'm really delighted with their commitment to being part of that. And Global Spectrum, as you point out, some 300 facilities around the world. They know what they're doing, and certainly they have the deep resources to be able to fulfill whatever they're committing to here today and make it happen. So I'm really thrilled that we're able to continue on with these two great providers, and then down the road we'll see where we go. But we encourage them to continue to provide the great quality service they provided in our community today. No question on that one, but other than, I'm sure the in-camera session will be enlightening, but I'm sure it is also potentially, separate and apart from what we may be able to decide publicly here today. And, I would affirm that I fully support the arrangement that's been made here and the benefit that they've added to the city of Hamilton. So additional reductions in our deficits and reduction in our capital requirements has been a very, very, positive outcome to the proposed one bidder take all kind of approach that to their credit they've collectively decided was worth rethinking. And so we are here today, I think, with two great providers that are going to serve us well for the next 5 years.
Thank you. Councillor Farr.
Yeah, I'm also very good with what's before us and think prudent to go in camera. I'm sure we won't have to go too long on that particular issue, but I wanted to thank John for speaking so well on behalf of all of the good managers and operators of our three downtown entertainment facilities. And as you well know, and Ryan knows, I get an opportunity to get in and out of the doors on a regular basis. I'm glad you opened by publicly thanking our friends at the FOC for the quick work they did with you and Mike Morielli and the great people, John Lashway at the Hamilton Honey Badgers. We didn't even know about 10 days ago whether or not the Raptors would even be in the final. And not only to turn over this public free event to watch the Badgers tonight at 7, and then the Raptors at 9 at First Ontario Centre. And we know thousands and thousands of people will go for two great pro basketball events tonight. But to be able to do that when staff are taxed to the max with the Canadian Open tells you how much we can lean on and rely on our friends who are managing this facility. And certainly Carmen's been doing a tremendous job. And I don't know if we have credited him yet, but I will, just in case it was missed, even though he's out of the room. Councillor Marula, I think can confidently say he orchestrated all of this from a political level anyway, and John, you're well aware of this. And the result is, in working closely with Councillor Tom Jackson of Ward 6, you already did say it. Oh, very good. Well, I'm glad. I don't need to prolong that. But I mean, $10 million in operating savings later. So it was a shrewd move and a prudent one. And our assets are better for it, even though they get older. I have one quick question, and I think it's for Rome, because there's currently some work going on at First Ontario Centre, some testing. Maybe it's completed now, but it'd be a good time now for an update, because a lot of like I say, I'm in there. Staff that work there have been there a long time. They're going to tell you the First Ontario Centre, formerly Cops Coliseum, still has some great bones. I know our friends would agree as well. And people are still enjoying the experience. we're fixing some things, and we've dedicated some capital dollars, and just an update on where we are with that, because it makes for a better fan experience no matter what venue's occurring.
Thank
Through you, to Rome.
Rome?
Through the chair, currently we're working on the elevators and the escalators, and that's a project that's underway. And as well as a report that we provided council, I think it was in December, on the brine lines and the concrete pad. We're doing some work right now. We have some building sciences consultants on site doing some infrared testing on the brine lines. And I hope to have those results and an information report back to council on August of this year.
Excellent. Thank you, Rome. And you know, I know we joked a little earlier about where, if we were to build a new rink, where it would be, but you know, there's a report coming, Madam Deputy Mayor, in just minutes here on today's agenda, that the numbers clearly show you want to put a major arena where all the services are and all the restaurants, the majority of restaurants are, and all the other wonderful venues and attractions, like the trend is across the world in North America, to get away from big, vast parking lots away out there on former farmland and put arenas and precincts, entertainment precincts, back in the hearts of major cities. So thank you, John. Ryan, great job as always, buddy.
Thank you. And we're going back to second-time speakers now. Councillor Clark?
So I'm just asking for clarification. Are we deferring this decision on the recommendation until we hear from council in camera? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am?
You had your request up.
I didn't know.
Thank you. So we are deferring this decision. We're going in camera. My understanding is anyways for G and H, so we have to defer that. We don't have quorum, so we'll receive the presentation afterwards. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. All right, so we have no quorum, so I don't know what we're going to be doing. We'll just, we can't approve anything. I hear somebody wanted to take a recess for 10 minutes. Keep moving. Sorry? Okay. Wait a minute. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Are we going to vote? We're going to do, we can't do a vote. You already seconded it. We're going to take a 10-minute recess because everybody else is deking in and out. We're having a problem with quorum. 10 minutes, so we're looking at 12:30, please, folks. 12:30, folks. I know.